Assalamu alaikum. Let's cook. Okay, people, this story right here is going to get long. It may have to get broken up into two parts. I didn't think it would be so much information in this story right here, but we'll see. Now, this is about a white man from Boston who went down to Georgia amongst the black so-called elite with his superiority white complex, doing what he wanted to do. This story didn't end well for anybody. But first, the subject in this story, we're going to talk about a black woman by the name of Lita McClinton, okay? Now, she got finessed and killed by her white husband, James Sullivan. It's another one of those cases of racially driven femicide, greed, all that. So let's start with the black woman in this story right here, the wife. Her name is Lita Sullivan. Actually, her name is Lita McClinton. She became Lita McClinton Sullivan when she married this white man. Now, at the time that this happened to her, she was a 35-year-old black Atlanta socialite. Now, a socialite is somebody who's well-known and, wealthy, fashionable, influential, social circles and things like that, attending all the social events, the parties, the charity functions and stuff. Negro elite. That's where she comes from, Lita McClinton, okay? She may not have been somebody who was nationally famous, but in this area in Atlanta, Georgia, amongst these Boule and Greek and, even if they're not a so-called member of that, against these elite Negroes, she was all the way in that, okay? So she's a socialite. She comes from a prominent family. Her father had money. Her mother has money. Her father's name is Emory McClinton, and this man was a federal transportation official, and her mother, Joanne McClinton, served on Georgia's House of Representatives. Now, Lita, she was a former debutante, okay? Now, this girl was described as somebody who was polished, trim. She went to private schools, the cotillions, all that. She graduated from Spelman College with a degree in political science. She was always dressed, fashionable, passionate about how she looked. She was really like that, you know what I mean? At her age coming up, she was like that. Now, Lita, she meets this white man by the name of James Sullivan in early 1976 when Lita is working as an assistant manager at a store called T. Edwards, which is an upscale clothing boutique in Lenox Square. He was 34. She was 24 when they met. Now let's get into a little bit of the history of this guy, James Sullivan, and how he even got down to the Atlanta area. Now, this is an Irish dude from South Boston. He's from a neighborhood called Dorchester, from a working class family. Now, this dude right here, he did well in school. He always wanted to do good in school and get in his education because he wanted more in life than his family had. His family's a working class family. They worked hard for what they had to do as white Irish people, in this area. Of course, hardcore racism in this Boston area. Most of these white folks in Boston are amongst the most racist people in America, some say, as what some of our black people experience being around them. Now, he went to high school. He went to a pretty good school called Boston Latin School, okay? He won an academic scholarship to the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. He graduated from college with an economics degree in 1962. Later on, he went to study finance at Boston University. And 3 years after completing school, he married a woman by the name of Catherine Murray, another Irish woman, and they had 4 children. James Sullivan, he worked in the accounting department at a Boston department store called Marsh. And after that, he worked at an accounting firm called Pete, Marwick and Mitchell. So he's doing this thing, he's married, working, and what happened was the way this dude ended up in the South is because he had an uncle named Frank Benert. Now this uncle of his didn't have any children, and this guy, he had a successful wholesale liquor business called Crown Beverages, right? So in the year of 1973, his uncle called him. He said, "Hey, I need some help down here. Could you come down here and help me run my business?" Okay. Now his uncle had founded this business in the year of 1962. The uncle has money. The business is booming and doing well. So his nephew, James Sullivan, he takes his uncle up on that offer. He goes down to Georgia with his wife and kids to Macon, Georgia to help his uncle, Frank, okay? So they're running this business. They're doing their 1-2. And in the year of 1975, his uncle, Frank Benert, passed away. So now James Sullivan becomes sole heir to this business. This man has no children, remember? Later that same year, James Sullivan and his wife, Catherine, divorced. They said that it was due to irreconcilable differences. The wife got custody of the kids, $1,000 a month in child support, and they moved back to the Boston area. Okay, this is 1975. So now James Sullivan, he's down in the Macon, Georgia area. His family's back in Boston. He's doing what he wants to do. And he meets this young black woman, Lita, in early 1976, as she's working as an assistant manager at T. Edwards, which is an upscale clothing boutique in Lenox Square. So I don't know what happened. They started busting it up. He was 34, she's 24. And remember, people, Lita is one of them dressed up, Spelman graduate, light skin. It matters, but it shouldn't matter. But you just, the mindset people just think for a minute. You know, colorism is a dangerous thing in our culture. She's a big deal, always fashionable. 24 is her time. So she meets James Sullivan, 34, white dude, polyester pants on, thick horn rimmed glasses, curly mop hair. Wife, 4 children. He didn't tell her about that though, but he came in there nice. He's kicking it to her. He has this New England accent. I guess she started liking this dude. Now finally, Lita's family and her friends, they see this guy James that she's been talking to, and they're like, nah, this ain't looking right, you know? James is white, number one. He's an outsider. He looks rough around the edges. And she's from a prominent, politically active African-American family in Atlanta, okay? So they're looking at him like, nah, this ain't it. Even with him being white, he just wasn't polished up enough. He's not a bum, you know what I'm saying? He ain't poor, he ain't broke. So Lita's all about fashion, and you know, since she looks nice, she's a black woman, and if a black woman could afford certain garments, she gonna look nice even if she broke, you know what I mean? That's what black people do, but she could afford whatever she wanted to get. So she tries to work on making this white man, James Sullivan, look nicer. She's teaching him how to fix his hair, convincing him to ditch the glasses, get contact lenses, you know, wear these clothes. You know, she's getting her build a white boo on. You notice we see that a lot nowadays, people on social media, you know, we see videos of these swirl women. You know, they go on social media doing stupid dances. They got a white man standing there looking stupid or whatever. And she takes this guy, you know, usually he goes to a black barbershop. He get the fade up right. She tries to get him to get a beard trimmed up and everything. Anything to look as close as possible to a black man. That's what they do. You know what I mean? You can see it on social media all day if you ever want to look into this disgusting stuff. But that it sounds like that's what Lita was trying to do with James back here in the late 70s. So James Sullivan, he lives in Macon, Georgia. Lita, she lives in Atlanta. They go back and forth. They kicking it. They dating. Again, people, James Sullivan is not a poor white man. You know, he bought her all kinds of gifts, took her to dinners, dancing, movies, basketball games, all that. Then this relationship blossoms. A few months later, James Sullivan proposed to Lita. Lita's parents, Joanne and Emery McClinton, they wasn't feeling it, you know, from the jump. The father really wasn't feeling it. He said that he was immediately suspicious of James Sullivan's arrogance and him always talking about how much of a big deal he was, really blowing himself up bigger than what he really was. You know, even though he wasn't a bum, he wasn't like, you know what I mean? He was talking like he was, you know, God's gift to a woman or whatever, or to the earth. You know, so he's down there with these black folks in the South. You could imagine a lot of people are being humble around him, though. You know, he's talking that big white man Boston talk, feeling himself. trying to make himself appear very important. The dad wasn't feeling that. He's also worried about the 10-year age difference with his daughter. He's also worried about this mixed race stuff, that the pressure and the stress that they'll have to endure. But the mother, Joanne, said, hey, listen, Lita wants to marry this dude. And as a parent, you can't look into the future. You can't see what's going to happen. So that's what she wants to do. James, the white man, proposes to Lita, but he never told her about himself. He never told her that he had an ex-wife with 4 children. So he's already being deceitful and lying, Then she figured this out after they got married. Too late. Here's the thing, people. James Sullivan has experience. He's already been a married man with 4 children, 10 years older than Lita. So before they got married, he pulled out that prenuptial agreement. Like, listen, you need to go ahead and sign this. Now, Lita had a divorce lawyer by the name of Richard Schiffman Jr. He looked at it and he told Lita, listen, this thing is one-sided. He said, listen, if anything happens, this dude gets everything and you get nothing. But Lita's in love. She's naive. She didn't read all the details. She just wants to be married to this white man. So she went ahead and signed it. So on December 29th, 1976, Lita and James Sullivan got married in a small ceremony in Macon, Georgia. Now, at the time, Lita still worked in Atlanta, so she would commute back and forth, live in Atlanta, go to Macon on the weekends with James. I guess she eventually got tired of it, so she quit her job and she moved permanently to Macon with her husband, James. So Lita and James, they move into this big house. They get a mansion overlooking the Ocmulgee River. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Maybe it's Ocmulgee River. It's on Nottingham Drive. Now, this area that they live in is a mostly all white affluent area of Shirley Hills. So they're in this crib. They fill the house up with Louis XVI furniture, made out of silver and crystal, really doing it big. Now, this guy, James Sullivan, right? He made a decent living as the owner of Crown Beverages, but they did live beyond their means. They knew that, you know what I mean? They lived beyond their means. They're not poor, but they couldn't live the way that they were living, really. They spent crazy money just to keep up with other people, look like the neighbors, And this guy, James Sullivan, he's down in Macon, Georgia, very motivated dude, very ambitious businessman, moving and shaking. He was known amongst the people who were getting things done. Business people in Macon, Georgia knew this guy to be kind of brash, kind of cocky and offensive. But that's also, too, because he's from the North. He's from Boston. He used to getting things done. But he is all them other things that they said he was, So he had a different approach to business. He didn't have that Southern laid back style when it came to business. His was let's get it going, get this done. Gained headway in the community. He worked with the Chamber of Commerce, other charitable organizations. There were also people in Macon, Georgia that weren't too happy about this guy, James Sullivan. Remember, he moved Lita to a predominantly all-white affluent area. They're not used to having black people there. So a lot of people were pissed off at him. Some neighbors would throw trash on his lawn and things like that. Basic American white peopling. You know what I mean? And he still just kept it moving. He did what he did. They attended all kinds of fundraisers, charitable events. They became embedded in, the upper echelons of Macon, Georgia. Lita, she worked with the American Heart Association. She would counsel unwed mothers and help in the Macon beauty pageants and things like that. Actually, Lita became a good deal under her tutelage. The Georgia Court of Appeals judge by the name of Yvette Miller was the first African-American woman to be crowned Miss Macon in the year of 1979. That's because of Lita coaching her through that, So when people looked at this couple, to outsiders, their marriage seemed happy and all that, but it wasn't like that in the house. Stuff was already crumbling. James Sullivan, he started to show his true self and who he really was. In December of 1982, which was about 6 years into their marriage, Lita found a Christmas card sent to James or Jim Sullivan from a woman signed, "Missing your kisses at Christmas." So at the time she got this card, James was down in Florida, but the card came to the house. So Lita's pissed off. So what she did was she got in the car right? Drove down to the return address to see what was going on. She needed more proof. And when she went down there, she did speak to a woman. The woman straight up told her, yeah, she's been having an affair with James Sullivan since this summer, this, and that. So it was undeniable now. Lita couldn't deny it. She's devastated. She went to Atlanta after finding this out to meet with a lawyer by the name of John Taylor. And he suggested that she confront her husband, James Sullivan, and she did. He denied all the allegations. And when she came to him with these allegations, he got angry and he said, how dare you accuse me of any infidelity, this. But he was doing that, y'all. I mean, he was. So the lawyer that she spoke to suggested that they sign a post-nuptial agreement. Okay, post. This one right here would supersede the prenup, and it would give Lita more financial security if anything happened with the marriage. Now, this post-nup gave Lita $300 a week plus $30,000 for 3 years if they ever divorce. So Lita, again, she didn't examine the details. She signed the agreement, which was foolish. And at the end, she stayed with James. She knew he was cheating. She had this post-nuptial agreement that he came up with, which was nothing. And in the year of 1983, James Sullivan sold Crown Beverages for $5 million. So now he's kind of rich. He got $5 million in 1983, sold the business. And with his new money, he was eager to get out of Macon, Georgia. He wanted to leave. He wanted to move to Palm Beach, Florida. So what he did is he went to Palm Beach, Florida and purchased a beachfront mansion for $2 million. Lita was not down with moving to Palm Beach, Florida. She knew that from her going there before, she knew that the white folks down there would not accept her. The white people down there didn't play that. No, you come in down here work. No, she ain't. She knew she wasn't welcome. So she told James that she did not want to move there. He bought the house anyway. Actually, Lita never even seen this big beachfront mansion that James purchased in Florida. So now here's the twist. Here's where things change in the story. James, he's moving from Macon to this mansion that he just bought in West Palm Beach. Now, when he's moving, right, he met a truck driver by the name of Tony Harwood. He got to meet Tony. They're busting it up. They're talking. Tony's the truck driver. They got the moving men moving stuff out, this, and that. As the men are packing up the truck, Tony Harwood and James are talking. They start, probably both talking big. Who knows? And this guy, Tony Harwood, he thought he was a real smooth guy. He was a street dude. He had a trucking business, but he had already done time in the North Carolina State Penitentiary for burglary and later for escaping prison. So he was a street guy. He's a thug. And they're talking. James Sullivan told Tony that he had a problem with his ex-wife and she was going to take him through the hoop. Now he's talking about Lita, even though it's his current wife. He said his ex-wife. Tony Harwood could feel James' vibe. He knew where he was hinting at. And finally, James Sullivan said that he needed somebody to take care of his wife, get her out of the way. So Tony Harwood said, I'll take care of it for you, $25,000. And so James looks at Tony Harwood like, you have somebody that could do it? And Tony Harwood gave him his approval like, no problem. So the deal is on. James Sullivan mailed Tony Harwood a certified check for $14,000. Mailed it to his double-wide trailer home in a place called Finger, North Carolina. James Sullivan told him the rest to come later. So Tony Harwood waited for the money. So in the meantime, James Sullivan, he's 42. He's living in West Palm Beach like a single man, doing what he wanted to do. He got a whole black wife in Macon, Georgia. He wasn't thinking about her. He's focused on getting amongst the social scene in Palm Beach and getting to the money, moving and shaking. So he's out playing tennis. He's taking flying lessons. He's drinking cocktails at parties. He's hosting extravagant parties at his mansion. So James Sullivan, he's really feeling like he's fitting in with these white folks in West Palm Beach. He feels like he's making progress with these new rich white folks in Florida. He was even appointed to the city's Landmark Preservation Commission. So he's really thinking like he's making it. But the white folks in West Palm Beach, Florida, they ain't see it like that. They did not trust or respect James Sullivan because, number one, they said he had new money. And these people in Florida, they have that old cracker money down there, that old Jew money. New money to them, that's crumbs. Dude, you just got $5 million from selling your people's business. That was the first time you ever had money. So they're looking at him like, yeah, you got that mansion and all that, but I mean, you broke. You know what I'm saying? Different kind of white people down there. And they also didn't trust him because he had a black wife. And to them, that was a character flaw. Okay? So notice how these white people, even though he's white, they're looking at him like, whatever, man. You know, we ain't no Negroes down here. Like, you can go around and black people, you know, and them country white folks and do that, but nah. So time goes on. Lita's living her life in Georgia. She's finding clues that James Sullivan, her husband, is having affairs with all kinds of women down in Florida. She would confront him about this stuff, and he would respond to her by cutting off her finances, financial oppression. Boom. I'm taking this from you. I'm taking that from you. They would have fights in the house when he would come back up there to Macon, Georgia. Sometimes the police would even respond. So this guy, James Sullivan, the husband, he has money, but he does overspend. He always did. He's down in Florida trying to impress these new white folks who got long money, and he don't. So James starts really squeezing Lita now. Now he's telling her things like to turn the air conditioner off, only spend this, and this for gas money and groceries. You know? But Lita, she wants to work it out with a white man, and she's falling into depression. She goes to see a psychologist to figure out ways to save her marriage. What a waste of time. So in 1984, Lita convinced James to buy a second home in Atlanta so she could be closer to her people, live over there again, do what she wanted to do. So James went and bought a 4-bedroom townhouse in Buckhead in the mid 400,000s. People, this is 1984, the mid 400,000s. So you already know what this house is looking like. And on August 12, 1985, as their 10-year anniversary approached, James Sullivan is out. Lita rented a U-Haul truck, hitched it to the back of her 1973 Mercedes 450 SL, packed it full of her belongings. She packed canned goods, paper products, household items, antiques, you know, crystal, porcelain, sterling silver, jewelry, things like that. Went to her crib in Atlanta, and a few days later, she filed for divorce. So Lita is in Atlanta living in her house. She's around her people, things she's familiar with, life in Atlanta. This is where she's from, her friends, family, they're close. She's back talking to other dudes. You know, she worked for different charities. She would work heavily in arranging decorations and entertainment for the 1986 New Year's Crescendo Ball for cystic fibrosis. This was held at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead. So this is what Lita's into. She's into moving and shaking amongst the Negro elite. You know, she's also in the process of this divorce, and she's concerned about that. She's got new lawyers, new motions, new court dates. You know, and at this time, she has no contact with her white husband, James Sullivan. They communicate through lawyers only. So James Sullivan, he's attacking her character. He's telling the lawyer that she's an adulteress, she's a thief and a drug addict. He said that he found dollar bills with cocaine residue sitting in the bedroom and in the medicine cabinet and things like that. He said she stole 2 diamonds from me, this and that. You know, one thing after the other. Lita's lawyer even had her taking monthly drug tests, urinalysis, so that they can refute his claims of her being a drug addict. Lita also claims that somebody is spying on her. She said that she's being followed by people. In March of 1986, she has a longtime friend from Spelman named Poppy Marable, and Poppy discovered that her husband, Marvin Marable, had been wiretapping her house, listening to her conversations. And many of these conversations were with Lita, okay? So this friend of hers from Spelman is going through her thing, her divorce, but her husband wiretapped their house. So he's listening to everything she's saying. And this is Lita's friend from college, so they talk a lot. So this guy, Marvin Marable, he's listening to his wife, who just filed for divorce from him, Poppy, who was Lita's friend, and Lita have all kinds of conversations talking. He's got this, he's recording it all. This dude is also friends with Lita's husband, James Sullivan. So what he did was he took the recordings, the tapes, and sent them in a big box to James Sullivan to his house in Palm Beach. so that he could listen to everything that Lita's saying with her close friend from college. So now it's January 1987, and they have to go to court. A judge is going to address a pretrial motion on a division of property between Lita and James Sullivan. They also want to look at this post-nup. Remember, she went and signed this post-nup, so the judge wants to see if everything is okay with that. They go to this pretrial motion, and a judge agreed in Lita's favor. Lita gets half of James Sullivan's assets. So that was outcome of the pretrial. Now, there's still an upcoming trial coming up on January 15th, 1987. So Lita's mother and her sister Valencia, they go visit Lita. They're busting it up, talking about this upcoming trial, what's going on, what's happening. And during that time, James Sullivan, the husband, he scheduled somebody to come to the house to take video inventory of everything that is in that house. But Lita got a call canceling that appointment. So that same night, Lita, she's hanging out with some of her friends. They go get something to eat. They go to a spot called R. Thomas Deluxe Grill. And her friend Poppy comes over the house to stay with her. Her friend and her daughter, they actually stay the night. They're at the house chilling, watching TV. They fall asleep. And the next day is when the trial starts, is when Lita goes to trial with her husband, soon to be ex-husband, James Sullivan. It's January 16th, 1987, a very cold, wet Friday. And this is when this story gets crucial, people. This is when it turns around. But I have to make a part 2. You know, this is the end of part 1. Go ahead and watch the part 2 video. I'll get at you on that one easy.